What's the good word, y'all? DKB here. For starters, Happy New Year's. Hopefully, everybody had a safe and exciting time for friends and family alike. Um, and as you can see from the thumbnail, so there was a viral clip that went out. Geno Smith, Zach Wilson, they had a little bit of an extended embrace after our loss to the Seahawks. It took us out of playoff contention. And I imagine that essentially this ended up being a bit of a pep talk. One of the interesting things that came out to me that I read up on maybe a week ago or so was that Zach Wilson had reached out to a lot of people, and most of these guys were legends, like Steve Young, Kurt Warner. There's a couple other names that they threw out there, but guys that had some adversity in the beginning of their careers, kind of how they dealt with it, some steps they took to get above and beyond it, etc. Geno Smith can definitely be placed into that category now with this play this season. We're talking about a guy that at one point we thought the punch from EK was going to essentially end his career. Not that, it was a broken jaw that EK gave him, but essentially the leadership is probably the last time we heard about a situation that bad from a starting quarterback when it comes to a lack of leadership. And if I remember correctly, the whole argument ended up being over something like Geno Smith showing up to some kind of event for EK. There was supposed to be an exchange of money for something. I think EK, flew him out or something like that. And Geno Smith didn't happen to have paid up when, EK was expecting it. Something along those veins. So Zach Wilson's, post-conference, comments were essentially the first time since that Geno Smith incident where we've seen something that bad from what was supposed to be a starting quarterback. So there was a lot of like parallels and a lot of storylines in the Seahawks versus Jets matchup. But my question to a lot of people would be, why couldn't Zach Wilson have a similar career arc to Geno Smith, and ideally with the Jets, of course, right? So the thought process for me is, and I was a huge proponent of this when we drafted him. Everybody knows Trey Lance was my guy, but I'm fully behind whoever we draft, and and wishing much success to them. So when we had Zach Wilson, went through a lot of tape, listened to a lot of guys, checked out the scouting reports. People are high on the talent. People are not so high on the experience aspect. There was a couple injury concerns and talent level concerns. Can he make the jump? I wanted him to be able to sit his first year. Granted, I understand the pros and cons to the whole situation. For me, I think the pros far outweigh the cons. Do you want immediate production and something that's, in favor for you? Yes. Obviously, if we can get a starter, 4 years worth of talent right away, we have no doubts whatsoever. He's a franchise level talent. Beautiful. But that doesn't work out for a lot of people. I mean, some of the names that stick to minds in terms of successful rookie seasons within like maybe the last 10 years would only be like Mac Jones before things fell apart, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, and I think he might be beyond the 10-year mark. But there's not a lot of guys in the league who have come in and had success right away that people would say, I don't have concerns about this guy. There's areas that need to be cleaned up, but he obviously has the chops to go and get the job done. And I mean, even for guys that are, 2, 3 years in, there's still a question marks. Jalen Hurts, for whatever reason, is still getting some critiques that absolutely blow my mind. You can still say the same thing about Tua. And so it's very hard to get a certified pass in the NFL as a quarterback. Zach Wilson ideally should have sat year one, and then year two, we can see if he could take off. But irregardless, we've seen what's happened now, but we still have time to implement a similar game plan. Right now, Zach Wilson's biggest areas of focus, we can say, is going to be the mental piece, which, if we want to focus on a specific part, he needs to make sure that he understands what a defense looks like when it's lining up. What kind of alignment are they in? What does it at least look like they're trying to take away? It's going to be some defenses that still confuse everybody every now and then with, some motions, things that they do, disguises. But for the most part, you should be able to identify what's going to happen pre-snap. The other huge piece is going to be in terms of why he's so inaccurate, which seems like it's going to be all footwork. Nobody necessarily makes a huge pain point about his arm angles he's throwing from, or his throwing motion, anything like that. It's all the fact that he's throwing off his back foot because he trusts his throwing power so much, and the fact that he never really sets his feet, and he's a little bit skittish in the pocket, to put it lightly. So there are some key things we can immediately say. This needs to be 100% of your focus right away. Give him the offseason, put together a strong plan, get it done. There needs to be changes in the offensive room in terms of the coaching ranks for sure. I'm perfectly fine with Mike LaFleur. I think there's going to be improvements from him for sure. We've seen it from year one to year two. Granted, there's definitely leaps and bounds I'd like to see, but I'm comfortable with where Mike LaFleur is at. Rob Calabrese, though, I don't know. I don't care if it's an outright replacement, but the guy definitely needs to be, sat back down to an offensive assistant position, whatever they want to do, and we need to get somebody that has the experience. I think quarterback guru gets thrown around a lot. So I'm not looking for necessarily a quarterback guru. If we can find one, perfect. But I definitely want a guy who has the experience, whether that's a former player that's coming in, a la like a Kurt Warner, or if it is just a guy that has connections in the league to Robert Saleh or Mike LaFleur, and they can go in there and get the job done. That will allow us during the preseason and hopefully during the regular season, because I'm not expecting that we see Zach Wilson hit the field beyond preseason whatsoever, unless we have bad injury luck or Zach Wilson makes huge strides in 2023. I want that essentially to be his new redshirt year. Allow him to continue working on the mental aspect of his game for the entirety of that 2023 season. The year beyond, he can have a true quarterback competition in 2024. Ideally, he would win it at that point. We get 2 seasons because 2024 will be his final rookie year. We can guarantee his 5th year for injury. That gives us 2 solid years to actually look at his body of work within that 34 game span. At that point, to make a strong decision. Can this be our guy? Can it not? And then at that point, he he can turn into a Geno Smith and an Aaron Rodgers and a Patrick Mahomes and all these guys, or he doesn't. But I think giving up on him is extremely premature. I don't think he's as huge of a reclamation project as everybody makes it out to be. I think the confidence is definitely shattered, which can make a lot of people, underperform to a severe degree. And then, of course, as we mentioned, the fundamentals, the pre-snap ability. A lot of people like to throw out that Mike LaFleur never lets him roll out and get outside of the pocket and all of these things, which I think he would love to give him the opportunity to do. But one of the huge things I try to point out is that Zach Wilson, as I mentioned, can't read a defense when he's in shotgun, when he's under center, and there shouldn't be a problem. Why would you expose him to an even worse situation by having him turn his back to the defense for a half a second or so? We also know he's skittish, as we mentioned, so it's just a recipe for disaster. You have to severely limit a lot of the things that you can do with your playbook and what you're asking of the entire offense as a whole, because there's these limitations with Zach Wilson at this point in time. But ultimately, the question would be not necessarily can Zach Wilson have Geno Smith's career arc, but let's say he pans out, right? Let's say my idea works. He redshirts this next season. He comes out firing in 2024, 2025. We start to look like a consistent playoff contender. We even get ourselves a Super Bowl ring or two, within 5 years. Nobody ultimately will care about his struggles in the first year or two. If anything, we will see a huge amount of praise for Robert Saleh and his staff to be able to self-diagnose the issues, make sure they put the proper adjustments and corrections in place, and actually turn out to be one of the first coaching staffs in this New York market that has been able to successfully develop a quarterback. We still would have achieved our goal, which is to maximize our roster under a quarterback rookie contract before we have to offer him something huge. And so I just don't really see the downfall. I don't really see the need to give up on him as quick as the rest of us are. Granted, a lot of it is coming from the toxic part of our fan base. we spit vitriol quite a lot when it comes to players that are underperforming and guys that we feel like are taken away from success that we can have. It's not going to come at any bigger position than the quarterback room for us, but I just feel like patience is going to be key. We've heard Robert Saleh, mention this a number of times. We don't want to hear about patience anymore, but I think this is the perfect setup to where we can have a quarterback room with a veteran from Zach Wilson to really learn from. We would still have Zach Wilson himself, and then we would still have Mike White or Chris Streveler, who is also still, essentially becoming a program guy. They'll have a second year in the system, a third year in Mike White's case. And it'll kind of be the perfect setup for Zach Wilson to still go out there and look, learn, and not necessarily have to worry about any pressure and just focus on getting his mechanics and all of these other things right. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too hopeful in that we can finally figure out a guy for ourselves and not have to rely on somebody that's been developed by another team and things just didn't work out from a money standpoint, or the situation deteriorated. And I'm tired of that. I'm very much so on the opposite side of things, at least from a lot of the guys that I talk to. I want us to develop our own guy. I want to see us have our own success and from start to finish have a quarterback finish in New York and retire, and we get to celebrate all his accolades and success. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Would you necessarily, do you care if Zach Wilson would have a career like a Geno Smith, or should we just be cutting ties now and we do the veteran approach for a couple years before we find a guy through one of these next few drafts? Irregardless, tired of looking at draft scouting reports anyways for quarterbacks. If it's not going to be a guy, that we try to do the Morgan Moses type, not Morgan Moses, James Morgan type situation with, I don't really care to deal with it too much, but we'll see. We'll see. The news that'll come out will hopefully come fast and furious for us in the off season, but let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Appreciate the support as always, and I'll catch you again. Peace.